Now, folks, Michael D. Higgins' 14-year term as Uachtarán na hÉireann comes to an end today. Ireland's 9th president will leave office at a time when his popularity, I would argue, stands at an all-time high. Of course, tomorrow he will hand over the keys of the Áras to Catherine Connolly. Joining us to share his thoughts on the Higgins presidency is Cootehill native and Chief Executive of the Irish Development Education Association, Ruairí McKiernan. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Joe. Good to chat to you again.
It's great to have you back on the show. You know him well. How did you meet, by the way?
I first met him on a train to Galway maybe 15, 16, 17, 18 years ago. I can't remember. I was leading up the spunout.ie youth charity, and we were running a mental health and suicide prevention campaign. And I was nervously and sheepishly approached him as a TD. He was a TD at the time, to ask him to support the campaign. And he met me with great warmth and kindness and curiosity and supported the campaign. And then I would have met him many times over the years at McGill Summer School and various other places, and just always stood out to me as someone that was very passionate about social issues and social justice, and they're obviously big interests of mine.
So you meet him on the train from Galway to Dublin, and then in time, in 2011, when he became president, he asked you to serve on his first Council of State.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, there were a few other little, moments between then, and I suppose one was I was involved with some other organisations, Children in Crossfire and AFRI, in hosting the Dalai Lama's visit to Ireland in 2011. And Michael D. at the time had a big interest in Tibet and in the Dalai Lama, and he seems to be interested in everything, really. But I remember him phoning me and spending an hour on the phone talking about the Dalai Lama and Tibet. And the event was called Possibilities, and this word really seemed to animate him and get him curious. He's a big fan of John O'Donoghue and Irish culture and philosophy, and he got talking about these possibilities and possibilities for a new Ireland, and how can we be different, how can we be better, how can we imagine a new Ireland. And I just thought him a fascinating individual, and as I said, I would have met him then at different points over the years. And when I left Spun Out, to be quite honest with you, I was at a bit of a loss as to where I was going next. It wasn't a highlight in my life that time, when you're going through just a moment where you're not sure what's next. And lo and behold, I got this call out of the blue, and he'd asked me to be one of his appointees to the Council of State for the next 7 years, which took me greatly by surprise and was a really great honour.
Yeah. Ireland's 9th president, how will his time in office be marked or recorded in the history books, do you think?
Well, I think if we just focus even in recent months and the last 2 years in particular, we've gone through perhaps one of the most turbulent, challenging and disturbing times in the last 100 years of global history when we consider the genocide of the Palestinian people. And Ireland is fortunate to have leaders, particularly through Michael D., in challenging that and in speaking out and in speaking on behalf of the majority for what is right and against what is wrong, which is the extermination of a people, and I suppose for human rights. But that isn't new to Michael D. He would have been in Chile as an election observer when Pinochet was the dictator. He spent time in Central America. He supported the Rossport 5 in Mayo. He stood up for the homeless, for refugees, for LGBTQ communities, and really peace, justice, nature, ecology, the environment, and I suppose a sense of Irishness that is take great pride in our language, in our culture, in our identity and in our history, but it doesn't do it in a narrow nationalist way that is all about sort of, shallow nationalism, but it's a proud nationalism that sees ourselves as part of the world and in solidarity with other struggles in other countries, that we can really shine our light, we don't need to demean or diminish other cultures or other peoples.
What do you say to those who are of the view that he was too vocal, who believe at times he stepped very close to the mark when speaking out on certain topics and may have crossed the line on more than one occasion?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I suppose that people knew him, and he was a TD for many, many years, and then he was a Minister for Arts and Culture, and famously saw the onset of TG Carr. But that's what people voted for. They voted for Michael D to be Michael D, and he did push the boundaries.
Sorry, Rory, has it set a dangerous precedent in that I know for many, many years we were giving out because the president would head to the Áras and never be heard of or from again.
Yeah.
And there was a certain expectation that they would stay out of the day-to-day politics. That changed, one could argue, with the arrival of Mary Robinson, likewise Mary McAleese, and then Michael D maybe brought it a step further.
Well, I mean, when you say dangerous, like one thing that comes to mind is that in talking about the housing crisis, and I'm a renter myself, and many people close to me are affected by the housing crisis, as are many of your listeners and their children listening in right now. And he spoke out about that and called it a disaster. And that's exactly what it is. And some people would say he's speaking out of turn and he's getting involved in the day-to-day. But many of us appreciate that. And it needs to be said. And, you know, we did have politicians in the recent presidential election agreeing with it. There's now a consensus that Michael D was right on Palestine, Michael D was right on housing and so on. So I do think you're right, Joe, to on one extent, that the parameters do need to be respected. And I do think some of the characters that made us wish to have themselves in office in recent times and certainly in recent weeks, we do have a process and it's far from ideal and it does need reform. But there are some voices that maybe would be dangerous in there and would cause real division. But I don't believe that Michael D has done that.
Yeah, his contribution to the arts, indeed all art forms, is worthy of recognition, as is his service to so many communities and community initiatives. He was always out and about, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was a real people's president, and I was in the Áras many times, and I think he welcomed, and Sabina, and I would really pay credit and respect to Sabina's role in the presidency and throughout her public life. They welcomed over 200,000 people to the Áras, which is quite incredible. And they really did so with humility, warmth and decency. And it really felt like a family home. I know it's not quite a family home, but like they really just made people feel at ease, feel at peace. And he travelled the length and breadth of the country, whether it be the ploughing championships and everywhere else, and really didn't necessarily see himself above anyone else. And that's the kind of republic that we need, that our leaders aren't so far beyond the people, that there is a connection, that there is a warmth, and that there's a humanity that stays true in the connection of who we are.
I'm delighted you mentioned Sabina. She deserves great credit for the role she played over the last 14 years. Not only a supportive role, but she herself was involved in many, many great initiatives. Is that role of the president's partner, wife, husband, partner, whatever it may be, is that something that needs to be looked at? Because, you know, I'm thinking of Martin McAleese and I'm thinking of different partners, husbands, wives down through the years. They have played an integral role, and I feel at times they don't get paid, and I feel at times they're not getting the recognition they deserve.
Yeah, I know it's, I suppose it's a bigger issue and a bigger conversation. And I think a lot of people, you know, want to see reform at the presidency to some extent. But I don't know, Joe, to be honest, my own personal feeling would be that it works out fairly well. And I do think a lot of people appreciate and witness the contribution that Sabina made. And I think you're right, Martin McAleese and as well. And it's the nature of public office. Often there is a spouse, whether it be the husband or the wife or whoever it is, they maybe don't get all that celebration, but not everyone wants the public light. It's a difficult place to be in, and it's not all high praise, as you know. There's a lot of abuse and challenges that come your way. So I would celebrate anyone, regardless of whether I have the same politics or views of them. It does take something else to put yourself out there as a public representative and serve the people, and do so over many, many decades. It's a big thing.
One of the lines I took from a piece you wrote over the weekend, you said, he gave his heart and soul to the job.
I believe so, yeah, I believe so. And I intentionally used those words, heart and soul, because I suppose when I met him, I remember mentioning McGill Summer School, he came up and he gave me a big hug. And I remember thinking this was very unusual for most politicians I maybe would have interacted with. There could be a kind of reserved nature or a cold nature sometimes, not always. But I also understand why that's possible. You can't always be going around hugging everyone. But there was a warmth about the man, and he really just did pour himself into it. And passion, like the passion just pouring out of him. And not just the soul, his own soul. And we have to remember the experiences and the environment and the upbringing he came from, where he grew up in a post-Civil War family where his father had great adversity and he was sent to live with his uncle in rural County Clare. They grew up in Limerick. And he wasn't a man or from a family of great means, and he came from great struggle, and he hasn't made a big thing of that story, but you do see it in his poetry. And I think that suffering has informed the soul, and that is what is connected with the suffering of the people of Ireland and the sense of justice and injustice, and that we want to see this better Ireland that is about fairness and equality.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Ruairí McKiernan, thank you so much for being with us on the show this morning. Ruairí, of course, well known to Shannonside Northern Sound listeners. He has guested on so many of our programmes down through the years. Ruairí served on the Council of State appointed by President Michael D. Higgins back in 2011, and at the moment Ruairí is the Chief Executive of the Irish Development Education Association. And I personally would like to wish Michael D. and Sabina the very, very best. I first met him here in this very studio in the presidential election campaign of 2011. And he drove from Galway that morning, drove himself, I hasten to add, and came into studio, very personable. And after that, on one or two occasions, I've been honoured with an invitation to the Áras, and I always found him to be very personable, great fun, as is Sabina. And just to take off my radio hat and put on another one, Michael D. and Sabina were so supportive of the Irish entertainment scene. They really were. And when they invited guests to the Áras, I know so many went there feeling so proud and honoured and privileged to be recognised by our president. So good luck to you, Michael D. and Sabina, and enjoy your retirement in Galway.